I remember the exact moment my world shattered. The silk sheets beneath me were cool against my pale skin as I lay in our bed. The bed I shared with Antonio, my husband, the man I thought I knew. The mansion was unusually quiet that evening, and I should have recognized it as the silence before a storm. But I was too focused on the ache in my chest, the hollow feeling that had been growing for weeks. My name is Ricardo Delisle, and I was born with features that people often call delicate, perhaps too delicate for the world of violence and power I'd married into. My skin was pale as porcelain, my lips naturally red as rose petals, and my hair fell in silky black waves to my shoulders. Antonio used to say I looked like a dark angel, something too beautiful for this corrupt world. Too beautiful for your own good, he'd whisper against my neck, his rough hands gentle on my skin. But that night Antonio was away on business. At least that's what Marco, his second-in-command, had told me. Boss had to handle something urgent in the South District, Marco had said, his eyes not quite meeting mine. He'll be back tomorrow morning. I should have questioned why so many of the guards were suddenly reassigned. I should have wondered why the security system seemed to malfunction all at once. But I was too consumed by my own dark thoughts, too hurt by what I believed was Antonio's betrayal. The rumors had been circulating for months. Whispers that Antonio was planning to eliminate me, that our marriage had become inconvenient, that I knew too much about the family business. I'd found mysterious meetings on his calendar, overheard hushed phone conversations that ended abruptly when I entered the room. Like a fool, I believed the poison they fed me. I was standing by the window of our bedroom, looking out at the manicured gardens below, when I heard the first gunshot. My heart seized in my chest. The second shot followed, then a third. Screams echoed through the halls, the few staff members who remained. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone, but it was already too late. The bedroom door exploded inward with a crash that made me jump. 3 men in black tactical gear stormed in, weapons raised. I recognized none of them, but I saw the cold calculation in their eyes. These weren't random intruders. This was an execution. "Please," I whispered, hating how my voice shook. "Please, I'll give you whatever you want. Money, information." The lead man laughed, a harsh sound that cut through me like glass. "We already have what we want, pretty boy. Your husband's empire is about to crumble, and it starts with you. Antonio." They wanted to destroy Antonio by killing me. But in that moment, with guns pointed at my chest, I didn't think of Antonio as my protector or my love. The poison had done its work too well. I thought of him as the orchestrator, the man who'd grown tired of me, who'd sent these men to clean up the beautiful mistake he'd made in marrying me. "He sent you, didn't he?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Antonio sent you." The man's smile widened. "Believe whatever helps you sleep, angel." The first bullet hit me in the chest and I felt my legs give out. I crumpled to the floor, blood blooming across my white silk nightshirt like crimson flowers. The pain was excruciating, stealing my breath, but worse was the betrayal crushing my heart. As I lay dying on the marble floor, blood pooling beneath me, my last thought wasn't of survival or revenge. It was of Antonio's face the last time I'd seen him that morning, the way he'd kissed me goodbye, lingering at the door as if he couldn't bear to leave. "I love you, Ricardo," he'd said, his dark eyes intense. "More than my own life. Never forget that." I turned away without answering, still angry about the rumors, still suspicious. Now, as darkness crept into the edges of my vision, I whispered into the empty room, "I hate you, Antonio Delisle. I hate you for making me love you. I hate you for this." The last thing I saw was the chandelier above me, its crystals catching the light like tears. Then nothing. When I opened my eyes again, I was in our bed. Sunlight streamed through the windows, warm and golden, and for a moment I thought I'd dreamed it all, the gunshots, the blood, the death. But my heart was pounding, and I could still feel the phantom pain in my chest where the bullets had torn through me. I sat up abruptly, my hands flying to my torso. The silk nightshirt was pristine white, unstained. My skin was smooth and unmarked. I was alive? "This is impossible," I breathed. The bedroom door opened and my heart stopped. Antonio stood in the doorway, looking exactly as I remembered him, tall and powerfully built, with sharp features that would have been cruel if not for the warmth in his dark eyes. His black hair was slightly disheveled, and he wore the same suit he'd worn that morning, the morning I'd died. "You're awake," he said, his voice filled with relief. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and pulled me into his arms. "I was worried when I came back and found you still sleeping at noon. Are you feeling all right, my love?" I was frozen in his embrace, my mind racing. This couldn't be real. I died. I'd felt the life leave my body. And yet here I was, and here Antonio was, holding me as if nothing had happened. What day is it? I asked, my voice hoarse. Antonio pulled back slightly, concern creasing his brow. It's Thursday, Ricardo. The same day I left this morning. Are you sure you're all right? You look pale. Thursday. The day I died. But the sun was high in the sky. It was midday, hours before the attack would come. I'd been given a second chance. The realization hit me like a physical blow, and I felt tears spring to my eyes. Antonio's expression shifted to alarm, and he cupped my face in his large hands, his thumbs brushing away my tears. Ricardo, talk to me. What's wrong? Did something happen while I was gone? I wanted to tell him everything, about the attack, about my death, about the horrible mistake I'd made in doubting him. But the words stuck in my throat. How could I explain something so impossible? Instead, I threw my arms around his neck and held him as tightly as I could, breathing in his familiar scent of cedar and smoke. I love you, I whispered fiercely. Antonio, I love you so much. I'm sorry for being cold to you this morning. I'm sorry for doubting you. Shoo, he murmured, running his fingers through my hair. Whatever brought this on, I'm not complaining. I love you too, Ricardo. More than anything in this world. He tilted my chin up and kissed me soft and deep, and I felt something break open in my chest. This kiss tasted different from all the others we'd shared. It tasted like a second chance, like redemption. When we finally broke apart, Antonio's eyes were searching my face. Ricardo, please tell me what's troubling you. The rumors about us, about me planning to hurt you, you know they're lies, don't you? You know I could never. I know, I cut him off, my voice firm. And I did know now. Whatever had happened in my first life, whatever had led to my death, Antonio hadn't been behind it. The certainty of that knowledge settled in my bones. I know you'd never hurt me. I trust you completely. The relief that washed over his face was almost painful to witness. He'd been carrying this worry, this fear that I believed the rumors. How had I been so blind? Before we dive into this twisted, reborn, revenge and redemption, emotional love story, if you are obsessed with reborn and revenge stories, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and also comment on the story, and don't forget this story is an original work of MeBL Stories, no copyrights. If you see this story in another channel, please report that channel for copyright and theft. Now let's dive in. Good, he said softly. Because I need to tell you something important. There's going to be a family meeting tonight. My brother Dante insists on having it here at the mansion. I tried to push it to another location, but... Your brother? I interrupted, my mind immediately alert. Dante. Antonio's younger brother, always hovering at the edges of family gatherings with his calculating eyes and false smiles. I'd never liked him, had always felt there was something off about his excessive friendliness toward me. Yes. He said there are some security concerns he wants to discuss. Some potential threats to the family. Antonio's jaw tightened. I don't like it, Ricardo. Something feels wrong. But he's family, and the others support his request for the meeting. Security concerns. Threats. A meeting that would pull Antonio away from the mansion, leaving me vulnerable. The pieces were starting to come together in my mind. In my first life, I died because someone had given the attackers information about the mansion's security, about when Antonio would be away, about which guards to reassign. Someone from the inside. And the only person who stood to gain from my death and Antonio's downfall was someone who wanted to take over the family business. Dante. Antonio, I said carefully, I need you to cancel that meeting. He frowned. What? Why? Because it's a trap. The words came out more forcefully than I'd intended. Your brother, I think your brother is planning something. Something terrible. Antonio's expression darkened. Ricardo, those are serious accusations. Dante is my brother. He's always been loyal to the family, to me. Has he? I challenged. I thought back to all the small moments I'd witnessed, the looks Dante had given Antonio when he thought no one was watching. Looks filled with resentment and jealousy. Or has he just been waiting for his moment? For a long moment, Antonio was silent. Then he sighed and pulled me closer again. Tell me everything you're thinking. And don't leave anything out. So I did. I couldn't tell him about my death and rebirth, that was too fantastical. But I told him about my suspicions, about the pattern of coincidences that had surrounded us lately. The guards who'd been reassigned just before threats materialized. The security glitches that happened at convenient times. The way Dante always seemed to be nearby when sensitive information was discussed. Antonio listened intently, his expression growing graver with each word. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. If you're right, he finally said, if my own brother is plotting against us, then we need to be very careful about how we handle this. We need proof. Then let's get it, I said. But first we need to make sure I'm safe. That we're both safe. Antonio's arms tightened around me. I will die before I let anyone harm you, Ricardo. That's a promise. I believed him. But I also knew that in my first life, his protection hadn't been enough. This time I needed to be smart. I needed to be prepared. This time I would save us both. The rest of that day passed in a blur of preparation. Antonio made calls to his most trusted men, Marco, his right-hand man, and a few others whose loyalty had never been questioned. He didn't tell them about our suspicions regarding Dante, not yet. We couldn't risk word getting back to his brother before we had proof. But he did subtly increase security around the mansion, bringing in guards he personally trusted and reassigning some of the newer members of our security team to other locations. To anyone watching, it would seem like normal rotation. But I knew better. As evening approached, I stood in front of our bedroom mirror, adjusting the collar of my black silk shirt. My reflection stared back at me, pale skin, red lips, dark eyes that held secrets they shouldn't possess. I looked the same as I always had, delicate and perhaps too pretty for the violent world I inhabited. But inside I felt different, stronger, more determined. Antonio came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist and resting his chin on my shoulder. In the mirror we made a striking pair, his dark intensity complementing my ethereal appearance. "You're tense," he murmured, pressing a kiss to my neck. "I'm worried," I admitted. "What if we're wrong? What if we confront Dante and he's innocent? Then we'll apologize and deal with the embarrassment," Antonio said simply. "But Ricardo, I've been thinking about what you said all day, and the more I consider it, the more sense it makes. There have been too many close calls lately, too many breaches that shouldn't have happened. If my brother is behind it..." His voice hardened. "Then he'll face the consequences." A knock at the door interrupted us. Marco entered, his expression serious. "Boss, we have a situation. I did some digging like you asked and I found something you need to see." Antonio released me and turned to face Marco. "What is it?" Marco glanced at me, then back to Antonio. "Maybe we should discuss this privately." "No," Antonio cut him off. "Ricardo stays. Whatever you have to say, he needs to hear it too." Marco nodded and pulled out his phone, tapping through several screens before holding it up for us to see. I checked the security logs from the past 3 months, cross-referencing them with the incidents we've had. "Boss, every single breach coincided with periods when your brother had access to the security office." My blood ran cold. It was true. It was all true. "There's more," Marco continued, his voice grim. "I have a contact in the South District, someone who works information. He told me there's been chatter about a hit tonight. On this mansion. The word is that someone on the inside has provided detailed layouts and security protocols." "Tonight," I whispered, feeling the phantom pain in my chest again. Just as it had been in my first life. Antonio's face had gone pale, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. "My own brother," he said softly, almost to himself. "My own blood." "There's still more," Marco said, and now he looked directly at me. "The target isn't you, boss. It's Ricardo." The room seemed to tilt. Antonio immediately moved to my side, his hand gripping mine so tightly it almost hurt. "Why?" I asked, though I thought I already knew the answer. "Because," Marco said carefully, "Dante believes that if Ricardo dies, you'll be devastated. Unfocused. Easy to manipulate or eliminate. And without you, Dante becomes the natural successor to lead the family." It was exactly as I'd suspected, but hearing it confirmed made it so much worse. Dante didn't just want power, he was willing to murder me to get it. Had probably been planning it for months, spreading rumors to create distance between Antonio and me, to make my death seem less suspicious. "Where is my brother now?" Antonio asked, his voice deadly calm. "At the family estate, preparing for the meeting he insisted on having here tonight." "Boss, I think the meeting was meant to pull you away from Ricardo, to leave him vulnerable." "Then we need to cancel it," I said quickly. "We need to." "No," Antonio interrupted, and when I looked at him in shock, his eyes were blazing with cold fury. "No, we're going to let my dear brother come here. We're going to let him think his plan is working. And then we're going to catch him in the act." "Antonio, that's too dangerous." He cupped my face in his hands, forcing me to meet his eyes. "Ricardo, do you trust me?" "With my life," I answered without hesitation. "Then trust me now. I will not let anyone harm you. Not my brother, not anyone. But we need to do this right. We need proof that everyone in the family will accept, or Dante will just try again." He pressed his forehead to mine. "Please, love. Trust me." I wanted to argue, wanted to beg him to just run away with me, to leave this life of violence and betrayal behind. But I knew Antonio. This was his family, his empire, his responsibility. And if we ran now, we'd be running forever. Okay, I whispered. But I'm not hiding. I'm going to be part of the plan. Antonio smiled, fierce and proud. I wouldn't expect anything less. We spent the next few hours preparing, but as the clock ticked closer to 8 p.m., the time Dante was expected to arrive, Antonio pulled me aside. Come with me, he said softly, leading me back to our bedroom and locking the door behind us. Antonio, we don't have time, I started, but he silenced me with a kiss. This kiss was different from the one we'd shared that morning. It was deeper, more desperate, filled with all the fear and love and determination that had been building between us all day. His hands tangled in my hair and I pressed myself against him, needing to feel his warmth, his strength. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing heavily. Antonio rested his forehead against mine, his dark eyes intense. I need you to know, he said quietly, that if anything happens tonight— Nothing is going to happen, I interrupted fiercely. But if it does, he continued, I need you to know that loving you has been the greatest honor of my life. You are everything to me, Ricardo. My heart, my soul, my reason for breathing. Tears burned at the back of my eyes. Don't talk like this is goodbye. We're going to survive tonight and then we're going to have decades together. We're going to grow old and gray and— He kissed me again, swallowing my words. This time the kiss turned heated, urgent. His hands slid under my silk shirt, caressing my pale skin, and I gasped against his mouth. I need you, Antonio murmured against my lips. Before everything that's about to happen, I need to feel you, to remind myself what I'm fighting for. My answer was to pull him toward our bed, shedding my shirt as we went. Antonio followed suit, revealing the strong planes of his chest, the scars that marked him as a survivor of this brutal world. I traced one of those scars with my finger and he shivered under my touch. We fell onto the silk sheets together, our bodies fitting together like pieces of a puzzle. Antonio's hands were everywhere, in my hair, on my skin, memorizing every curve and angle of my body as if he might never get the chance again. You're so beautiful, he whispered, his lips trailing down my neck, across my collarbone, like something from a dream. I arched into his touch, my hands gripping his shoulders. When he kissed lower, his mouth hot against my skin, I felt like I was burning from the inside out. Every touch was electric, every kiss a promise. We made love with a desperate intensity, knowing that this might be our last peaceful moment before the storm. Antonio was gentle despite his urgency, his hands reverent on my body. When he moved inside me, I wrapped my legs around his waist, pulling him deeper, wanting all of him. I love you, I gasped as pleasure built like a wave inside me. Antonio, I love you so much. My Ricardo, he groaned, his movements becoming more intense. My. Always mine. When we finally reached our peak together, it felt like dying and being reborn all at once. We clung to each other as waves of pleasure crashed over us, our bodies trembling in the aftermath. Afterward, we lay tangled together, my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow. His fingers traced lazy patterns on my back, and for a moment, I let myself imagine a different life. One where we could just be two people in love, without the violence and betrayal that surrounded us. But that wasn't our reality. Not yet. We should get ready, I said softly, though I didn't move. 5 more minutes, Antonio murmured, holding me tighter. Just 5 more minutes of peace. I gave him 10 before I finally pulled away, pressing one last kiss to his lips before I rose from the bed. We dressed in silence, the intimacy of the moment still lingering between us. But now there was also steel in our spines, determination in our movements. Tonight we would face Dante. Tonight we would end this. At precisely 8 p.m., the gates of our mansion opened to admit Dante Delisle's car. I watched from the window of Antonio's study, my heart pounding. Antonio stood beside me, his hand warm on the small of my back. Remember the plan, he said quietly. You stay in the study with Marco and the guards. I'll meet with Dante in the main hall. And if he brought the attackers with him? Then they'll find themselves outnumbered and outgunned. Antonio's voice was cold, all business now. I have 30 men positioned throughout the mansion. Dante doesn't know it, but he's walking into a trap. I nodded, but my hands were shaking. Seeing Dante walk up to our door, knowing what he'd planned, what he would have done if I hadn't been given this second chance, it filled me with a rage I'd never felt before. When Dante entered the mansion, I could hear his voice carrying up the stairs, jovial and false. Brother. Thank you for hosting the meeting on such short notice. I know how busy you are. I couldn't hear Antonio's response, but a moment later Marco appeared at the study door. It's time, he said. Ricardo, you need to stay here. Boss's orders. But I shook my head. No. I need to be there. I need to hear what Dante has to say, need to see his face when Antonio confronts him. Marco looked uncertain. Boss will be furious. Then he can be furious with me later, I said, moving past Marco before he could stop me. I'm not hiding like a frightened child. This is my life Dante tried to take. I made my way down the hallway, staying in the shadows until I could see into the main hall below. Antonio and Dante stood facing each other. Antonio tall and imposing, Dante slightly shorter but with the same dark hair and sharp features. They could have been twins except for the cunning in Dante's eyes. So, Dante was saying, shall we wait for the others to arrive before we begin discussing the security concerns? There are no others coming, Antonio said calmly. This meeting was always going to be just you and me, brother. Dante's smile faltered slightly. I don't understand. I sent invitations to the entire family council, which I intercepted. Antonio's voice was steel. Because I know what you've been planning, Dante. I know about the attack you ordered for tonight. I know about the men you've been coordinating with. I know everything. The color drained from Dante's face, but he recovered quickly, forcing a laugh. Antonio, what are you talking about? Have the stress and paranoia finally gotten to you? I would never. Don't. The single word cracked like a whip. Don't insult my intelligence by lying to my face. I have the security logs. I have testimony from your contacts. I have everything I need to prove your treachery. Dante's false smile disappeared entirely, replaced by a sneer. Prove it to whom? The family? They're weak, Antonio. They follow you because they're afraid, but they don't respect you. Not really. Not like they would respect me. Is that what this is about? Antonio asked, and I could hear the hurt beneath his anger. Respect? Power? Was my brotherhood not enough for you? Your brotherhood? Dante laughed bitterly. You've never treated me as an equal, Antonio. Always the older brother, always the one in charge. And then you brought that pretty little whore into our family. You didn't get to finish. Antonio moved so fast I almost didn't see it, his fist connecting with Dante's jaw with a sickening crack. Dante stumbled backward, blood trickling from his split lip. You will not speak of my husband that way, Antonio said, his voice deadly quiet. Ricardo is worth 10 of you. Dante wiped the blood from his mouth, his eyes wild. Ricardo. Everything changed when you married him. You became soft, distracted. Weak. The family needs a real leader, not someone who's so busy fucking his pretty boy that he can't see the threats around him. The only threat I see, Antonio said, is standing right in front of me. It happened so fast. Dante reached for the gun at his back, but before he could draw it, Antonio's men materialized from the shadows, weapons trained on him. Dante froze, his hand still on his weapon as he realized he was surrounded. Did you really think I'd be unprepared? Antonio asked. Did you really think I'd let you walk in here and threaten everything I've built, everyone I love? Dante's face twisted with rage and desperation. You can't kill me, Antonio. I'm your brother. Your blood. You stopped being my brother the moment you plotted to kill my husband, Antonio replied. Blood means nothing without loyalty. I couldn't stay hidden any longer. I stepped out of the shadows and descended the stairs, feeling every eye in the room turn to me. Dante's expression when he saw me alive and unharmed was almost worth all the fear and pain. Ricardo, he breathed, shock written across his face. But the men I sent haven't arrived yet, I said, walking to Antonio's side. My husband immediately wrapped an arm around my waist, pulling me close. Because we knew you were coming. Because we outplayed you. Dante stared at me with hatred so pure it was almost physical. You. This is all because of you. Antonio was strong before you came along. Now look at him, reduced to playing house with a... Careful, Antonio warned. Choose your next words very carefully, brother. But Dante was beyond reason. He lunged forward, somehow breaking free of the guard's grip, his gun now in his hand. Time seemed to slow as I saw his finger tighten on the trigger, saw the barrel swing toward me. I didn't have time to move, didn't have time to think. All I could do was brace for the impact, for the pain I'd felt before. But it never came. Antonio threw himself in front of me, his body a shield, and I heard the gunshot echo through the hall like thunder. Antonio grunted, stumbled, and I caught him as his knees buckled. No. The scream tore from my throat as I lowered Antonio to the ground, my hands already stained with his blood. No, 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 Antonio, stay with me. Behind us, I heard more gunshots, heard Dante's cry of pain, but I couldn't focus on anything except Antonio's face. His skin was pale, his breathing labored, and blood was spreading across his white shirt in an ever-widening stain. Ricardo, he gasped, his hand finding mine. Are you hurt? I'm fine, you idiot. Tears were streaming down my face. Why did you do that? Why did you? Because I love you, he said simply. More than my own life. Remember? Someone call an ambulance. I screamed over my shoulder. Marco was already on his phone, barking orders. Around us, guards were restraining a wounded Dante who was clutching his shoulder and cursing. I pressed my hands to Antonio's wound, trying to stem the bleeding, but there was so much blood. Too much blood. Don't you dare die on me, I sobbed. Don't you dare leave me, Antonio Delisle. We're supposed to grow old together, remember? We're supposed to have decades. We will, he whispered, though his eyes were starting to flutter closed. Love you, so much. Antonio? Antonio. His eyes closed and panic seized my heart. No. Stay with me. Please. The next few minutes were a blur. The ambulance arrived, paramedics swarming around Antonio, loading him onto a stretcher. I tried to go with him, but Marco held me back. Let them work, he said gently. We'll follow right behind them. I watched helplessly as they carried Antonio away, and for the second time in what felt like one lifetime, I felt my world collapsing. But this time was different. This time, Antonio had taken the bullet meant for me. This time he was the one dying. And I was the one left behind, consumed by terror and love and the desperate need for him to survive. Because I'd been given a second chance at life, at love, at everything. And I wasn't going to waste it. The hospital waiting room was sterile and cold, nothing like the warm luxury of our home. I sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair, still wearing my blood-stained clothes, my hands shaking despite Marco's attempts to calm me. Boss is strong, Marco kept saying. He survived worse than this. But had he? The bullet had entered his chest, dangerously close to his heart. The paramedics' faces had been grim as they'd worked on him in the ambulance. The surgeon who'd met us at the hospital had offered no promises, only a brief nod before disappearing through the operating room doors. Hours passed. Dawn broke outside the windows, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I watched the sunrise with hollow eyes, remembering how just yesterday morning, or was it a lifetime ago? I'd woken up in Antonio's arms, confused and frightened but alive. Now it was Antonio fighting for his life. Senor Delisle? I jerked my head up to find the surgeon standing before me, still in his blood-stained scrubs. My heart stopped. I couldn't read his expression. Is he? I couldn't finish the sentence. He's alive, the surgeon said, and I felt my knees go weak with relief. Marco caught me before I could collapse. The surgery was successful. The bullet missed his heart by centimeters, but we were able to extract it and repair the damage. He's stable now. Can I see him? The words came out as a broken whisper. He's in recovery, still unconscious from the anesthesia. But yes, you can see him. Follow me. The recovery room was quiet except for the steady beep of monitors. Antonio lay in the hospital bed, his skin pale against the white sheets, tubes and wires connecting him to various machines. But his chest rose and fell steadily, and when I took his hand, his skin was warm. I sank into the chair beside his bed, bringing his hand to my lips. You scared me, I whispered. You scared me so badly, my love. His eyes remained closed, but his fingers twitched slightly in my grip. I chose to take that as a good sign. I know you can't hear me, I continued, my voice thick with unshed tears, but I need to say this anyway. Thank you. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for loving me enough to take that bullet. And thank you for giving me a second chance, even though you don't know that's what you did. I rested my head on the edge of his bed, exhaustion finally catching up with me. When you wake up, everything is going to be different. No more secrets, no more doubts. I'm going to love you the way you deserve to be loved, every single day for the rest of our lives. And if anyone ever tries to hurt you again, they'll have to go through me. I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, I felt fingers gently stroking my hair. My eyes flew open and I found myself staring into Antonio's warm brown eyes. Antonio, I breathed, sitting up so fast the chair scraped against the floor. You're awake. How do you feel? Should I call the doctor? Do you need? I need you to stop panicking, he said, his voice hoarse but laced with amusement. And I need you to come closer so I can kiss you. I laughed through my tears and carefully leaned over the bed, mindful of his injuries. His lips met mine in a soft, gentle kiss that tasted like second chances and new beginnings. When we pulled apart, Antonio studied my face with concern. "You look terrible, love. Have you slept at all?" "Says the man who got shot," I retorted, but there was no heat in it. "How can you joke at a time like this?" "Because I'm alive," he said simply. "Because you're alive. Because we both survived, and that's all that matters." His expression grew more serious. "What happened to Dante?" "He's in custody. The police have him, along with the evidence Marco gathered. He's not going to hurt anyone ever again." Antonio was quiet for a long moment. "My own brother," he finally said. "I still can't quite believe it." "I know." I squeezed his hand gently. "I'm sorry, Antonio. I know how much that betrayal must hurt." "It does," he admitted. "But you know what hurts more? The thought of losing you. When I saw that gun pointed at you, Ricardo, I didn't think. I just moved. Because a world without you in it isn't a world I want to live in." Fresh tears spilled down my cheeks. "Don't ever do that again. Don't ever sacrifice yourself for me." "I can't promise that," Antonio said softly. "Because I would do it again in a heartbeat. That's what love is, isn't it? Being willing to die for someone?" "No," I said fiercely. "Love is being willing to live for someone. To fight for them, to stand beside them, to choose them every single day." I brought his hand to my lips again. "So that's what we're going to do. We're going to live, Antonio. We're going to build a life together that's worth all the pain we've endured." He smiled, that beautiful smile that had first captured my heart. "Then we better get started." 3 months later, I stood in the garden of our mansion, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. The roses were in full bloom, their sweet scent carried on the evening breeze. Everything was peaceful, beautiful, a far cry from the violence and bloodshed of that terrible night. Strong arms wrapped around my waist from behind, and I leaned back into Antonio's embrace with a smile. He was fully healed now, with only a scar on his chest to remind us of how close we'd come to losing everything. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured against my ear. "How lucky we are," I said honestly. "How many people get a second chance like this?" "Not many," Antonio agreed. He turned me in his arms so we were facing each other. "But we're not going to waste it, are we?" "Never," I promised. In the months since the attack, everything had changed. Dante was in prison, awaiting trial for attempted murder and conspiracy. Several other family members who'd been complicit in his schemes had been removed from their positions of power. Antonio had restructured the entire organization, placing emphasis on loyalty and honor over profit and violence. And us? We'd never been stronger. "I have something for you," Antonio said, pulling a small box from his pocket. I raised an eyebrow. "We're already married. If you're proposing again?" "Just open it," he said with a laugh. Inside the box were 2 rings, beautiful bands of platinum etched with an intricate pattern that looked like twisted vines. I picked one up, examining it more closely, and realized the pattern spelled out words in tiny script. "Forever bound," I read aloud, my voice catching. "Antonio, I know we already have wedding rings," he said softly. "But I wanted us to have something new. Something that represents this new beginning we're building together." He took one of the rings and slid it onto my finger, right beside my wedding band. "Forever bound, Ricardo. No matter what comes, no matter what challenges we face. You and me against the world." I took the other ring and slid it onto his finger, my hands trembling slightly. "Forever bound," I echoed. "I love you, Antonio Delisle. I loved you in my first life, and I'll love you in every life after this one." He pulled me into a deep kiss and I melted into him, feeling safe and cherished and whole. When we finally broke apart, the sun had fully set, and stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "Come on," Antonio said, taking my hand. "I have one more surprise for you." He led me inside the mansion and up to our bedroom. But when he opened the door, I gasped. The entire room had been transformed. Candles covered every surface, their soft light making the space glow like something from a fairy tale. Rose petals were scattered across the bed, and soft music played from hidden speakers. "Antonio," I breathed. "When did you?" "I had help," he admitted with a grin. "Marco and the staff were very enthusiastic about the romantic gesture." I laughed, feeling lighter and happier than I had in ages, maybe ever. "It's perfect." Antonio closed the door behind us and drew me into his arms again. "Dance with me?" We swayed together in the candlelight, no formal steps, just the two of us moving in sync. His hands rested on my waist and I wrapped my arms around his neck, content to simply be close to him. "I was thinking," Antonio said after a while. About what you said. About living for someone instead of dying for them. Yes. I want to make some changes. To the business, to our lives. I want to move away from the violence, invest in legitimate enterprises. Build something we can be proud of. He looked down at me, his expression serious. It won't be easy and it won't happen overnight. But I want to try. For you. For us. My heart swelled with love and pride. We'll do it together, I said. Every step of the way. He smiled and leaned down to kiss me again. This kiss was different from the others we'd shared tonight. Deeper, more heated. His hands slid under my shirt, caressing my skin, and I pressed myself closer to him. I need you, he murmured against my lips. I need to feel you to remind myself this is real. I understood completely. Even now, months later, I sometimes woke from nightmares where I was back in that moment, watching Antonio bleed out on the floor. The only thing that calmed me was feeling his warmth beside me, hearing his heartbeat steady and strong. We moved to the bed, shedding our clothes with practiced ease. Antonio's hands were reverent on my body, tracing every curve and angle as if memorizing me all over again. When his lips followed the path his hands had taken, I gasped and arched into his touch. So beautiful, he whispered, his mouth hot against my skin. My beautiful Ricardo. I pulled him up for another kiss, deep and demanding. When we finally came together, it felt like coming home. Antonio moved inside me with a gentleness that made my heart ache, each thrust a promise, each touch a declaration of love. I love you, I gasped as pleasure built inside me like a wave. I love you so much. Forever, Antonio groaned, his movements becoming more urgent. You're mine forever, Ricardo. When we finally reached our peak together, it was transcendent. We clung to each other as waves of pleasure washed over us, our bodies trembling in unison. Afterward, we lay tangled together, sweaty and sated, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my back. This, Antonio said softly, this is what I want. Every night for the rest of my life. Just you and me loving each other. Then that's what we'll have, I promised, pressing a kiss to his chest, right over the scar from the bullet. Every night, every day. Forever. He pulled me closer and I rested my head over his heart, listening to its steady beat. The sound was the most beautiful music I'd ever heard, proof that we'd both survived, that we'd been given this impossible second chance. As I drifted off to sleep in Antonio's arms, I sent a silent prayer of thanks to whatever force had allowed me to come back, to fix my mistakes, to build this beautiful life with the man I loved. I'd been given a second chance at love, and I wasn't going to waste a single moment of it. 5 years later, I stood in the garden again, our garden, which had become a sanctuary of peace and beauty. The roses bloomed more abundantly than ever, and new additions had been made. A fountain, benches perfect for reading, a small gazebo where Antonio and I often had breakfast on sunny mornings. The business had changed dramatically. Antonio had kept his promise, transitioning away from the darker aspects of the family's enterprises and into legitimate businesses. It hadn't been easy and we'd faced opposition from some of the old guard. But Marco and our other loyal allies had stood by us and slowly, we'd built something we could be proud of. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to find Antonio approaching, a smile on his face that still made my heart skip a beat even after all these years. There you are, he said, pulling me into his arms. I've been looking everywhere for you. Just enjoying the peace, I said, leaning into his embrace, and thinking about how far we've come. No regrets? He asked, though his tone was teasing. He knew the answer. Not a single one, I said firmly. Well, except maybe one. He pulled back to look at me, concern flickering across his face. What's that? I regret all the time we wasted, I admitted. Before everything happened. When I doubted you, when I let others poison my mind against you. I wish I'd trusted you from the beginning. Antonio cupped my face in his hands, his thumbs brushing my cheekbones gently. Those doubts, that pain, they led us here. To this moment, to this life we've built. And I wouldn't change that for anything. How did I get so lucky? I whispered. We both got lucky, he corrected. We found each other, we fought for each other, and we chose each other. Every single day we choose each other. That's not luck, Ricardo. That's love. He kissed me then, sweet and tender, and I felt the same rush of emotion I always felt when he touched me. Some things never changed, and my love for Antonio was one of them. When we pulled apart, I noticed Marco approaching from the house, a knowing smile on his face. Am I interrupting? He asked. Always, Antonio said with a grin. What is it? The investors are here for the meeting. And before you ask, yes, all the security arrangements are in place. No surprises this time. Good, Antonio said. He pressed one more kiss to my forehead before starting toward the house. Coming, love? In a minute, I said. I just need a moment. He nodded and walked away with Marco, their voices fading as they discussed business matters. I turned back to the garden, breathing in the sweet scent of roses and feeling the warmth of the setting sun on my face. I'd been given an impossible gift, a second chance at life, at love, at everything. And I'd used that gift to build something beautiful. Not just a life free from violence and betrayal, but a life full of love, partnership, and hope for the future. Sometimes, late at night, I still wondered about it all. About how I died and come back, about whether it had been real or some kind of fever dream. But then Antonio would pull me close, his heartbeat steady beneath my ear, and I'd know that it didn't matter. What mattered was this: we were here, we were together, and we were happy. Everything else was just details. I took one last look at the sunset, then turned and walked back toward the mansion, toward Antonio, toward our life, toward our future. Forever bound, just like the rings on our fingers promised. And this time, I knew with absolute certainty, we would make forever count.